feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today we can finally stop chasing Manfred and get back to chasing the pennant. This is another episode of the Chasing the Pennant podcast, and I am here today with three of my co-hosts. First, Biscuit, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about some positive baseball news, so I've been looking forward to this podcast all day, and I'm happy that we're recording earlier as well.
Absolutely. It's always nice to get an early one in and then have the rest of the night to do whatever. So I completely agree with that. Sean, how you doing today?
I'm great. I can't wait to talk about positive baseball news. It's finally happening. It feels like it never was going to happen, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like it's been years since we were able to actually talk about positive news. So finally good to get that back out here. And Boric, how you doing today?
Doing well. I saw, too, I think MLB Network must have listened to you and your other podcast, Andrew, because they stole the 2011 162-game thing from you on last night's MLB Tonight.
The game 162, where that was the crazy ending to the season where no playoff matchups were set going into that final day. So, yeah, I was able to do that on the Pub Sports Radio one. Was that a few weeks ago now?
Yeah, I just found it funny that they stole your idea.
That is pretty good. But yeah, let's jump into this as we finally get to talk about some positive news. Earlier this week, we were able to find out that baseball has, I guess, kind of agree. It got implemented by Manfred, so I still don't know if they ever actually came to an agreement on this fourth season. But either way, we were having baseball. The expected opening day is July 24th. July 24th, with most teams starting then. I believe I read that some teams, there's going to be like two games on July 23rd, allowing two teams to get primetime TV. I think one's expected to be the Yankees and having Garrett Cole start, and then the other one I think is expected to be the defending world champions in the Nationals. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets teamed up with those two teams, considering the Phillies will be playing both those throughout this season. So first off, let's jump into the 60-game season. Every team is going to get 40 games within the division, and then 20 interleague games matched up with your respective division. So the NL East with the AL East, NL Central, AL Central, and then the NL and AL West. So first, Sean, I'll start with you. I'm pretty worried about the Phillies' schedule here. These 60 games, I feel like the National League and American East are going to have some of the tougher games here, considering they could be two of the best divisions this year. What are your thoughts on the early going on the expected Phillies schedule?
Well, yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a rough ride for them. They definitely have one of the hardest divisions as it is. The NL East has been a bloodbath for a couple of years now. And I'm already worried because, the Nationals just won the World Series and the Braves are the Braves, how good they are. And, we still have to look out for the Mets. And to have to play, those guys 10 times out of 60, that's half the schedule. And then you look over at the American League East and you got the Yankees and, the Red Sox are still a force to be reckoned with. I mean, it's nerve-wracking. It's going to be a tough schedule, but I think the Phillies are set. They've collapsed the last two seasons, but that's been at the second half. They had a great first 60 games the last couple of years, so I think they're in good position.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that they can make a playoff run here in terms of the competition they are. I think I'm very worried about how they fare in terms of the bullpen, because it's going to be interesting to see how the pitching staff does with the shortened season. We've talked about before with how the shortened season is going to affect the starting pitchers, so the bullpens are going to come into play this year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see in that sense, because I feel like that's where a lot of the National League East teams at least struggle with it, is the bullpen. So I think it's going to create an interesting dynamic there. Another big rule change here is the obviously universal DH, and we've talked about it before. Let's start with Biscuit on this one. How do you think the DH is going to fare within the within the whole league, but especially for the Phillies.
I think both rule changes that have been mostly talked about and proposed, and I guess are both going to be implemented this season, both as the universal DH and the runner on second base in extra innings. As much as I'm cool with the DH, I'm a big offense guy. The DH coming to the National League was never something that bothered me. I always welcomed it. I'm not crazy about the runner on second rule. However, I think both of these rules provide unique benefits to the Phillies in the shortened season. Specifically going to the DH, you have a handful of guys that can fill that role for the Phillies, starting with the big acquisition in the early mid-season last year in Jay Bruce. That was really helpful when Kutch went down. I think Jay Bruce will fit into that role nicely. I think Alec Boehm's someone who could see time in that spot. I think Rhys Hoskins is someone who could see time in that spot. And I think Andrew McCutchen could see time as the DH when you want to get him off the field and get him some rest every once in a while. And that's another thing I want to bring up too. This really does give people the opportunity to kind of rest but still be in the lineup as well. So you could see virtually every player in that role at some point. I could see JT Realmuto there. I could see Bryce getting a day off the field and being in the DH spot. There's a lot of different ways to kind of play around with it. And like I said, because the Phillies have these additional guys like Jay Bruce, Alec Boehm, you could put one of the other outfielders there. You could supplement one of those position players and put one of the regulars in that DH spot. It really gives the Phillies a little bit more flexibility. And I think given the season and the limitations that it's going to impose, I think it's a total benefit. And I think this is something that's going to help the Phillies in their chances this season.
I agree completely. I think the Phillies are definitely well made for it. They have a bunch of different options that they can throw there. And then I'll ask all three of you this one. I'll start with Bork. Do you think the Phillies with the universal DH, are they benefited the most out of the National League East?
Well, before I answer that, so we don't pass it, I wanted, since Biscuit brought up the runner on second base, to bring up how much that actually did factor into minor league games. J.J. Cooper of Baseball America said more than 70% of games have been resolved after a single inning during the 18 and 19 campaigns, compared to the 2 years prior, that was only 45% of games. So if they're trying to, that's a big percentage increase if they're trying to speed up games, especially for this season. Like the universal DH, we don't know if that'll last into next year, because they said they might not do that to them like we had in some of the original deals, but we'll see, and that remains to be seen. But as it comes to the DH, it's tough to say, because the Phillies do have a really good lineup. But if you look at Biscuit's most hated team, the Mets, too, the Mets, of course, have Cespedes coming back. So if Cespedes is able to stay healthy and DH well and hit well for you, Cespedes is, if he's playing, say, 80% of himself, is probably a better DH than Jay Bruce. So it's kind of tough to say, because he has an injury, but then they also have Nimmo coming back from an injury. They might choose him to DH sometimes rather than play the field and put someone else out there. The Nationals have Asdrubal Cabrera, who's obviously a much better hitter than fielder. So they have a lot of guys to pick off of in our division, where the Marlins don't really matter, unless if the Marlins pitch out of their asses. They ain't getting anywhere. So the Marlins don't matter. But I think it's really tough, because what we also have to factor in is we're in, like Sean brought up, we're in the toughest division, because how I would kill to be in the Central right now. Like, I mean, like the Phillies have to play against the DH juggernauts of the Rays. Even the Red Sox still have a good DH. They don't have the pitching anymore with Sale injured, but they still have a good DH. And then you got, obviously, the Yankees, who have, obviously, whoever the hell they want to put at DH. They have all the options in the world up there. So we have to factor that in, too, and the Nationals are so deep. I think, Andrew, you talked about it on our other podcast. Like, it's not as much of an advantage as we really think, and since I examined that further, it's a good advantage to have for the Phillies with their roster structure, but because of who we have to match up against in this 60-game season against the two better, more competitive divisions in baseball, I don't know how much of an advantage it's actually going to be.
That's a really good point, especially, like you said, with how tough the division is. I actually think, though, I'm going to say the Central Division, I think both, AL obviously is Kansas City, and then the NL, I guess the worst team would be the Pirates, but I think the Central could be two kind of sneaky divisions if it was a normal year. I mean, I don't think this year is going to be really tough to tell on who's going to like really outbreak anything. But in a normal year, I think I think both Central teams could have gotten a little better. I think obviously the Tigers and Royals are the weaker points. I agree. The Central probably does have the easiest schedule. But like, I loved what the White Sox did in the offseason. I think they were going to be a lot better this year. I think the Reds were going to be a lot better this year than they were last year. So I wish we could see what the Central would have been this year in a full season.
Mm-hmm. The Central lacks more pitching though than some of the Eastern divisions. That's obviously not compared to us, but than some of the other people in the Eastern divisions. So that's what I compare it to. Some of their lesser teams, even the Cubs, don't have nearly the pitching they used to have. So that's why I still label them the easiest, in my opinion.
That's a very fair point. But Sean, what do you think? Does the DH help the Phillies the most in the East, or who are you going with?
I think the Phillies definitely have the best. It helps them the best, I think, in the NL East compared to the rest of the other teams. I don't agree that the Central is, a cakewalk. I think, the Cardinals are definitely better off having a DH than some of the other NL East teams. But, the Braves' best, within the NL East, the Braves' best hitters are also their best defenders. They don't gain much from getting a DH. They have some young guys that they could call up and, hit in that DH role. But, I don't see it helping them as much as it would help the Phillies. And then the Mets getting Cespedes in the lineup and off the field is way bigger than anything the Phillies could do. So, compared to the other teams, I think the Phillies are in good shape, but I wouldn't say they have the best case scenario in the East.
I also want to point out I never said the Central was a cakewalk. I just said
that's definitely what it seemed like, though. You made it sound like the Central was going to be like
it's because
there was no talent in the Central.
We're in like the juggernaut of like they were talking about on MLB Network right before I got on, and they said the Phillies are in the toughest spot because they got to go up against the AL East all the time, and you got to go up against your division rivals, which you're supposed to get a break in the Marlins, but we sucked against the Marlins recently, so that might not be a break whatsoever. Where the Central's not a cakewalk because Sean pointed out the team that just pulls a rabbit out of a hat most seasons sometimes in the Cardinals when they don't even have the deepest roster and they're just like, hey, look at this. David Freese is playing like the best thing since sliced bread. Matt Carpenter came out of nowhere, and then here's just this random guy we pulled off the street. Like that tends to be the Cardinals. Like you had Tommy Edman, who I love now as a hitter, come up for them. So I like the Central, but it's more on a hitting baseline than a pitching baseline, which I think in a 60-game season, when you're playing with the bullpens, I know the Reds president said this on MLB Network, you're going to be using some starters for 2 innings at a time. So I think pitching, whoever has the better pitching might play more this year than even past years.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the things that scares me the most about the Phillies. I don't know about you guys, but like obviously you have Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. They're all like they're obviously solid pieces at the top, and they're going to be fine up top. But my concern is when you get down to the other, like the question marks, and Jake Arrieta, how long can he last? Jake Arrieta, Zach Eflin, all them, like you're going to be running out of bullpen pieces to use, and obviously that's been a huge struggle for the Phillies. So that's one of my biggest concerns, especially if some of the star pitchers can't go deep into games anymore for the beginning of the season. Because that's been one of the problems, blowing games from the bullpen these last few years. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of pan off from that.
It also depends if we trained well. I think Girardi probably had us training well because I know Howard Reynolds said he was shocked when he interviewed Kevin Cash. He said he already had people throwing simulated games. So that goes to show how advanced the Rays are when it comes to doing so. If we had people we know we had people in Clearwater, obviously, since of the virus tests. If any of those guys were throwing simulated games while they were down there, some of the pitchers or some of them have kind of been doing it on backfield. That obviously helps compared to just kind of throwing it around and not throwing anything close to a game.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think the one team that I think it really helps alongside the Phillies in this division is the Washington Nationals. I'd be interested to see what they do with you got Howie Kendrick you can put there. They got Eric Thames in the offseason. They got Asdrubal Cabrera, Ryan Zimmerman, Yan Gomes. So they got a bunch of veteran hitters that it's going to be interesting to see where they kind of have that flow in their DH spot. But Biscuit, you haven't answered it yet. Who do you think it helps the most?
I am going to go on a limb here and say the Phillies. I just think it gives them an opportunity to kind of play around with the lineup a little bit more. It gives it a little bit more longevity. I think this Phillies lineup is going to put up runs. I think it's going to be a productive lineup. I think a lot of the guys last year either started off really poorly at first or just had off years. I think Gene, now that he's in a little bit, better of a state of mind, given everything that he had going on both on the field and off the field last year, his weight's back down. I think he's in a better baseball mindset. The thing is, I think this phrase is tied hand in hand with baseball, that it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. It's not, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is now a full-blown sprint, and you had way too many players starting off slow last year. That just it can't happen. It can't happen if the Phillies want to be there in October. Like Bryce Harper started off slow. Real Muto started off slow. Aaron Nola started off slow. Zach Wheeler for the last few years is known as being a guy who's gone on crazy stretches in the second half, so he started off slow. It just can't happen, because if it does, you're really, if they're not getting hot until game, 40 to 50, you're not going to be in there at the end. It's not going to be worth it. So the DH does help, but I think more so than anything, having everyone just on the same page, hitting the ground running, is what really is going to bring the Phillies their first playoff appearance since 2011. I think the DH does help. Like I said, you have big names to put there. I think Alec Bohm will see most of the time there. I think Jay Bruce will see a good amount of the time there as well. I think that gives the opportunity to really, have your best hitters in the lineup. I think that does mean some guys will be playing out of position, mainly Scott Kingery. I think you will, for the most part, only really see him in the outfield this year. So I do think it gives the Phillies a much more competitive advantage, and I'm really excited to see just how they mix it up and put different guys there, because I do think it's going to be collaborative. I don't think you're going to just see one guy in the DH spot every single night, but I do think compared to other NL East teams, like I believe it was either Sean or Andrew, they were rattling off all the guys the Nationals had. I think that's another team that can get that competitive advantage, but Cespedes with the Mets, Cespedes' cheeks. I think we've seen the best of him already, and I think he's well past his prime. I don't think it gives them too much of an advantage, and obviously, the Braves, it was mentioned that most of their best hitters are also, star players at their fielding positions as well, so I don't think it really helps them in any way. I think one guy for the Braves that you might see there is Nick Markakis, just because he's getting a little older. But other than that, I think the Phillies are really the team that's going to benefit most from using the DH.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, it's like you said, it's going to give us a shot to kind of get off to a better start. You're not going to have to worry about the pitchers hitting. So a couple times here and there, hopefully it can help the Phillies get to that better start that we didn't get to last year. And we saw a lot of the different players kind of picked each other up at different points as each player kind of went through their own little slump. And you mentioned Zach Wheeler, and I don't know, have any of you guys heard if he has any plans yet on what he wants to do? Because I know he's been outspoken about he's going to have the newborn soon, so he doesn't know if he was going to play beforehand. So I don't know if any of you guys heard anything on whether he's planning on participating.
I haven't, and I know Garrett Cole could be another guy, because when I read an article, they said he has a child coming, so depending around when that is, I don't even know if he would be able to pitch that night baseball game opening the season, depending when his wife's supposed to be due, or girlfriend. I'm not sure if he's married yet.
I haven't heard anything either. From what I recall from when that story broke was that I believe his child was due in July. So I guess, like, depending on when that happens, if it's, closer to when the season starts, or if they're still in spring training 2.0, it might be, him just missing a couple days. I still think I'd be very surprised if he, of all people, turned around and say he wasn't going to play this year. But, it's totally possible. And, you can't really criticize these people for making that type of decision. But on that front, I just haven't heard anything lately.
Okay. So that's one thing that's going to go into one of the next rule changes as well. Is I don't know if you guys saw this, but when I was preparing for the show, I found this out. They actually have a COVID-specific inactive list this year. So on top of the IL now, they're going to have also the COVID list. So I think for guys like that who are going to sit out a couple of games to be with family or something like that, or if they test positive, instead of putting them on the IL, because the IL makes the player miss at least 10 days if they get put on that, where they're going to allow this COVID list if players have tested positive or show symptoms, they're going to be thrown on this list. And then if they're just showing symptoms, there is no they can come back whenever. They don't have to wait the 10 days. So that is why they created that extra list. So that's something Wheeler could probably go on in that sense if he was to miss, say, a week or two for his newborn.
I know they did still say when I was looking at on MLB Network, they do still have, which I was surprised they didn't extend, but the 3-day paternity list too, which that was one of the things I was surprised did not get extended this year. But because of what you just said, maybe they could use a loophole and use the coronavirus IL to have people stay out longer. So maybe that's why they didn't extend it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that list. So that probably is why you're right that they added this one. So a couple other things in terms of what's going to be happening in this year. As Biscuit mentioned earlier, the 10 in extra innings, 10th inning, they are going to throw a runner on second base to start the inning with nobody out. It's going to be the guy that created the last out or the last batter of that 9th inning is going to be put on second base to start the 10th with nobody out, and then if he scores, the pitcher will be charged an unearned run. I am personally not a big fan of it. I don't know. I know, Biscuit, you mentioned it earlier, but I don't know, Sean, I don't think you've said anything about on this topic yet. Are you a fan of that, or would you rather just a normal extra inning contest?
I'm kind of impartial to it. Like, I am a traditionalist when it comes to rules. I like things, the normal way. I hate when they kind of change things to make it faster. And this is definitely one of those things that they kind of change to make faster. I think it kind of takes away from, I feel like walk-offs aren't going to have the same, weight that they carry. It's not going to be as impressive if there's already a runner at second. But, if it brings people back to the game, I don't hate it. It's going to give more action in the extra innings, than, I hate when a game goes 19 innings, but at the same time, it makes a good story. So I am impartial to it. I think in a season like this one, it's not a bad, year to start making these rules. It's just I hope that they don't kind of stay around unless they work. If they get really good feedback on it, I wouldn't mind if it stayed around.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you, Sean, on that. It's not, given the year and given everything happening, I get it just because you're already playing in a condensed season where there's not going to be many off days. It's just not. You're just creating such a bigger window for injuries to happen if you are playing those 19 inning games with nothing, happening in between because you're just wearing your bodies down at that point. I agree too. It's not anything like to run home about. Like, this is not something I'm excited for. And I think another point that you brought up with walk-offs and extra innings, it does kind of take away some weight for that because, like, let's be real, you start with a runner on second base in an inning with no one out. Like, that's 2 sack flies and they're in. The game's over. So it kind of does, wow, if I could talk, it does legitimize the impressiveness of a walk-off hit, working counts, getting runners on, kind of takes away from that big moment. That's one of the most, in my opinion, I love walk-offs. I could watch highlights of people walking off all day. I just think it's such a, the euphoric reactions that you get from it. It's just so beautiful and fun to watch. And I do think it kind of delegitimizes that. But like you said, given the year, given everything happening, it is what it is. It's not something I hope that they would continue unless it really does provide some kind of, positive change to the sport. But I don't really see a case where this is like something that really will catch people's eye. But I could be wrong.
See, I agree with you guys that it's different for this year and everything kind of just we have to take what comes. And I know us in Philly all got pissed at Mad Dog the other day for calling out Harper, but he was kind of right about this because everyone that knows and ever watched him knows how much of a traditionalist he tends to be. He said this year you just got to go with what it is. You just got to accept what it is and take it for what it is. But I'm not so sure they're not going to look at the numbers and try to implement it because 70, like obviously the MILB to the MLB is different. So the percentage rate's going to be, change rate's going to be different. But if it goes up, say 10 to 15%, on games ending sooner compared to going deeper, I think the league will really take a look at that and potentially try to force that like they forced other rules into next year's scheduling. I'm not sure if that's the only thing I don't necessarily agree is not going to be the case. I think that could end up being the case.
See, I'm surprised they had that much of a positive rise there in the games finishing, because you would think, like, with the runner on second, nobody out, you think each team would have a pretty good, or obviously each team has a pretty good chance to get that one run in. So I would have thought there would have been like a lot of each team getting that one runner across, but not getting anything else. So a lot of games extending past the 10th just because of teams tying 1-1 in the 10th inning.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's why I was surprised by the number, but because the number was so separated from 45 to 70%, if they have anything like a 10 to 15% increase in the MI or in the MLB with obviously the different talent level, I think that might end up becoming a rule for, like we all said, better or worse.
Right. Another statistic that I saw about this, and I was kind of caught off guard by this, but it makes sense, and I don't have it in front of me. I can't remember it, but it said that, you know, a huge majority of players, when they let off that inning in extras, sacrifice bunted to get the runner over to third with one out. And I feel like that same thing's going to happen. You know, you might as well just start them on third with one out. You know, it's at that point, it's like, what's the point of, I don't know. I don't want it to become an automatic thing. You know, every time you start off the inning when a runner's at second, the first guy up's just going to bunt, and then you have him at third.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about if we did, because I know when we originally rumored this, not to stay on the topic too long, but wasn't it originally like the 12th inning or something like that? They said they would start it out. I know it wasn't the first inning when this rule was originally rumored, so would you guys be more open to that so games don't go longer after like the 11th inning? They would put a guy on second.
I would rather it that than the 10th inning, just because I don't mind extra inning games, but again, if it works, yeah, I mean, if they're trying to end it, then yeah, they can do that. But like I said, I'm surprised, like, because I thought a lot of teams would do what Sean just mentioned. You bunt that first guy over, get him to third, and then all it takes is a sac fly or something. Or even, I was thinking about how many teams just bunt twice. Like, you bunt the guy to third, and then you do a suicide squeeze or whatever, and just bunt him home. Yeah, especially if you're the home team, and you know, say you shut the other team out there, and now you just need 2 bunts to win the game.
Yeah, especially since reading that stat makes it even more interesting that the percentage change was so vast, because you would think the other team should have freaking scored and did it something if they bunted a guy over, but I guess maybe their pitching just sucked and they scored, and then the bottom of the inning the other team was like, yeah, about that, and then hit a 2-run walk-off. So.
Yeah. So, and then another thing that caught me by surprise, I know we talked about before on other ones, was like the taxi rosters and everything and how much they were going to expand it. And we were thinking like the 40-man roster, maybe it gets to 50. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the teams are going to be submitting 60-player rosters, and 30 of them can be active on that specific game. So obviously we were expecting the expansion in the active roster there to 30, but the 60 just seems like a very, I know you probably need a lot more guys. Just 60 seemed like a really high number. I mean, I feel like you're going pretty deep now into the farm system for a 60-player roster there.
Yeah, that's hefty. I honestly, I did not even see that, but that's insane. That's a lot of players that I haven't even thought of that could be on the roster now. Wow.
Some of your rooks could be on the roster, because they said some of those undrafted free agents could potentially be good enough arms to be a reliever fairly quickly. So you could see them as part of the 60 working out. And then if enough hits the fan, they might have to come into the bullpen, or if everyone sucks, then they might just come into the bullpen by default.
Yeah, well, one thing that the 30-man roster stuck out to me right away, and I haven't really even given thought to this because I feel like I didn't see it officially, but I guess if it's official, it means guys like Bohm are going to be up right away. Any of those bubble guys that were, about to be down, like Kyle Garlick, who else? Torreyes, Josh Harrison, all those guys that were right there that, should be on the major league squad but weren't because of the 25 or 26-man roster, like they're going to be there. And it gives, especially the Phillies, like we were talking about with the DH, it gives them a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm not sure if you read, but I thought I read on MLB Network while watching it, the 30-man roster was still only for month 1, and then the next final month of the season it goes back to 26.
I did not see it. That would surprise me though. Like with all the cases going on, like I don't see why they would shorten it just because of how much. I mean, who knows what's going to happen or who gets tested positive. That would surprise me if they drop it like that.
No, I was a little surprised, but I just remember reading it. I'm trying to see if I can find it anywhere, but I know they said that it was dropping after the first month when they showed it up on MLB Network on MLB Tonight last night. So,
Okay, so I just found it. What it says is, once the season begins, teams will be allowed to carry 30 players on their active roster. That number will drop to 28 after 2 weeks, and then 26 after 4 weeks.
okay. So it's a incremental drop.
So that's also gonna be interesting because after 2 weeks, you're not really gonna know who's gonna be hot or cold enough to probably cut them. So that'll be some pretty tough decisions there.
Yeah, Greg Amsinger also brought up a funny point that I think you guys will laugh at on this. You're going to have teams in this schedule with a 60-game schedule, and he started dying laughing when he said it. They're going to be 2 weeks into the season. They're going to be like, we should sell. We should totally sell now. And it's going to be like 2 weeks into the season. You're going to see this, like some teams like such and such is rumored to be traded. Such and such, they're going to have like 5 guys rumored to be traded 2 weeks into the season, and you're going to be like, okay, this is weird. That's going to be something that's weird to see this year. All the trade rumors coming literally as soon as we start the season, basically.
Yeah, that's the trade deadline they did set is August 31st. So it will be interesting to see if teams are going to be more hesitant or more aggressive to kind of pick someone up early on or even at that deadline. Because, I mean, I guess you're going to run into the same issue as you ran into last year's. Like, who's going to want to pay for a rental for like just that short month into the season?
Yeah. I think you're going to have a lot more verbal agreements this year for trades to get done, in my opinion. Meaning that they would have to commit to staying with the team, obviously.
I agree with that. So moving on to the next thing is the transaction freeze comes to an end on Friday. Obviously, we're all hopeful JT Realmuto eventually gets signed. Hopefully quicker rather than later. We can get that all done. But obviously, when it did go on freeze, there were still some free agents left there to be signed. And with this expansion, with knowing that you can invite 60 players here, let's start with Biscuit. You mentioned you had a pitcher you thought would be interesting before the show. So let's hear that pitcher and what other possible free agents you want the Phillies to at least look at.
Well, this is a known name in the Phillies clubhouse. You guys are very familiar with this guy. I was thinking about the great Jason Vargas. He was awful in the second half last year, and that's putting it very nicely because I have other explicitives that I could use to describe how he pitched. But in his first half, in about 70 innings of work, he pitched, I think it was like a 3.738 earned run average. So he wasn't complete garbage. And the reason I went with a pitcher anyway is just because, like I mentioned earlier, and I believe I mentioned before the show as well, I think the Phillies are fine on bats. I do think it's a lineup that's going to be able to produce runs. I do think they have a lot of depth both on the bench and, beyond that could be efficient enough that if, someone went down, like, let's say, God forbid, knock on wood, we lose Kutch. We have Bruce who could play, Bohm who could DH. If we want to give Bruce a day off in the field, you have guys like Quinn, Adam Hazley, Nick Williams. There are plenty of people to kind of go around in that mix. I saw a lot on Twitter about people calling for, wanting Yasiel Puig to sign, and everyone was like, oh, that would be so awesome. And, sure, Puig's a dynamic player, but he hasn't been anything special in years. I don't, know where he's at baseball-wise. I believe he hardly played last year, if I'm not mistaken, or if he did so rather poorly. But I think, even from when this was going to be a normal season, we said the Phillies are still just lacking pitching depth, both in the rotation and in the bullpen as well. I'm going to look here at the rotation specifically just because beyond Nola and Zach Wheeler, you really do not know. You can't sit here with confidence and expect much from either any combination of a 3-4-5 in Jake Arrieta, Vince Velasquez, Nick Pivetta. Zach Eflin, Ranger Suarez. Like, it's just still too concerning. And given the format and it's a grind for a win every night now. You can't just throw away losses. It's not like a full season. So I still think I'm just still concerned about this rotation. And I think someone who's a little bit more of a veteran presence, he doesn't really need to prove himself at this point in his career. Another guy, obviously, we brought up another Philly favorite earlier in Drew Smyly, even though he's already gone with San Francisco. But I wouldn't have hated the idea of Smyly coming back to the team in a, number 4, number 5 rotation spot, just because, like, you've seen what more do we need to see from guys like Nick Pivetta, Vince Velasquez, and even Eflin at this point? Like, their arms just aren't there. They're not going to be good enough to be, mainstays. And it's concerning. So I went with a pitcher for this one. I think the class, obviously, at this point, the free agent class is really slim at this point. I don't know if you guys found any other hidden gems in there, but Vargas was the best and only eye that came to mind. But I would go with the starter for sure, just because the rotation is going to need some help.
I also went with a pitcher just because he had all the skill in the world. He used to be really good a few years back, and I know his projected stats this year when they do it on Baseball Reference were a 4.58, which isn't great, but for the Phillies for a fifth starter, that would be a hell of a lot better than anything we had in recent history. So I was looking at a guy that's still young, if you can get him going with our great pitching coaches, Aaron Sanchez, now that we have good coaching. Still didn't get picked up by anybody. He could also be out of the pen for you. Again, to put it lightly, he didn't do well at all last year, but he did well a couple years back as a fifth starter still for Toronto. He just wasn't able to ever keep up with his numbers from 2016, where he looked like he was going to turn into one of the best in the game. But in terms of a fourth or fifth starter, he might still be able to do that for you. And if he can't do that, he definitely sure as hell has the movement on his pitches, the fastball, the breaking ball stuff. If you can harness it in, to definitely be a good long man or a reliever for you in some capacity. So I also went with a pitcher because I agree with Biscuit. There's a lot more potential pop when it comes to pitchers in this, especially for a shortened season. A guy like Sanchez can really just kind of go out and try to blow it by people, not worrying about anything. Same with Nick, so maybe that'll benefit Nicky P finally. So they'll be able to do those types of things and go out there and take full advantage of it. So I like him as a pitcher as well, because hitters, that's for like Young Ho Kong and like guys like that, there's nobody really neat because they're very similar to all the guys you picked up anyway.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I agree. I think if the Phillies worry, they got to look at pitching. I would look specifically for relievers. But before I give mine, Sean, did you have anyone else besides those two?
Well, I was gonna switch away from some of the pitchers. Like when I first looked at the list of still potential MLB free agents, I didn't see a single name that wasn't better than, surprisingly wasn't better than Pivetta or Velasquez or even Ranger Suarez or Adonis Medina if he comes up. So my main focus for this was hitting, and it feels like somebody that would have fit the Phillies mold. And obviously, like as we've looked into this, he said he wasn't going to play this year, but Ben Zobrist, he is 39, but I feel like he still has enough left in the tank for a season or two, and I feel like he's the perfect, kind of veteran guy that could help out some of the young Phillies infielders. I mean, they don't really like Kingery and maybe Bohm if he comes up, that kind of player could really help those guys. And then one name I'm going to pull out of left field that hasn't played consistently in a while, and he is on the older side, is Hanley Ramirez. It sounds kind of crazy, but the power is still there, and he has come out and said he wanted to play in 2020. But obviously he's on the older side. He has struggled on the batting average side when it comes to his last couple seasons and the few appearances that he's had. But to have that kind of right-handed power, we have Jay Bruce coming off the bench. We have Neil Walker's probably going to come off the bench. Maybe if we got like a right-handed hitter in that kind of spot, it might come in handy.
Yeah, no, that's actually a name I never expected, but I see your point on that. I mean, if he can bounce back, and depending on what kind of workouts he put through, I mean, I feel like with the 60-man invite, he's probably at least worth a workout in these next months.
Yeah, I agree. He's only 36 years old, and that sounds surprising. It just feels like, he came up so young and he's been around for so long. But, he had the power. He had that ability to drive the ball into the gap, and that's something the Phillies could use coming off the bench, especially in the DH role against a left-handed pitcher. So.
Wow, 36. That's 36 is very surprising. I feel like he's been in the league forever.
Yeah.
Since the
definitely...
mid 2000s, he's been around.
Yeah, he's like the Crosbys of hockey, where everyone just thinks they've been around for 7 centuries. Meanwhile, they're not as old as anyone even closely thinks they are. But Hanley could play pepper with our left field in the humidity since we're starting in the heat of the summer, just like he hit doubles, like Sean said, into Fenway's gap or off the monster 24/7 when he was in Boston, which when he got cut, some people were pissed about that. So it's not like that was a universal decision that Boston fans agreed with. So I was kind of surprised he didn't get picked up because of his RBI potential already. So that wouldn't be a bad hitter to pick up as a spunky pop potential. It's just he is similar to some of the other guys we have. But.
And I mean, we mentioned, I forget who it was, mentioned Puig. Is that someone? I mean, that's been a hot topic in Philly all over Twitter as well. So why don't we talk about Yasiel Puig real quick? Is that somebody any of you guys want to sign?
No.
Unless if he's starting, he has to be starting. I'm not signing. I don't want to. I mean, if you're going to potentially decide to put him in center, then maybe. But other than that, I don't see a point of having him off the bench. I don't think he's a guy that does well enough when he doesn't get enough ABs.
I agree with you, Boric.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good, Sean.
He's the best available free agent, by far. But it just doesn't make sense. I mean, unless you put him in center for a 1-year contract and, have Hazley come in, in a DH role or as a defensive, replacement, it doesn't make sense for the Phillies to get him. I think a couple other teams are going to be in on him, and I have a feeling he'll have a job within the next couple weeks once the transaction window opens.
Yeah. Wasn't he also rumored to be potentially going to Gabe's team like months ago? Wasn't he rumored to be going to the Giants?
Yeah, I honestly think it was pretty close to that before the freeze, and then the freeze came into effect. So I don't know if that will amp back up or not, but it definitely will be interesting to pay attention to because, like Sean said, he's definitely the best guy available probably right now. And I mean, unless if you want to throw him in center, I guess maybe DH, but then you're blocking other guys, maybe like Alec Boehm coming up. And I know we would all rather see Alec Boehm starting day one from DH rather than Yasiel Puig.
I agree with that. Right now, by the way, just to look at his projected stats would be 10 homers and 31 RBIs with a 271 average is what Baseball Reference has him at.
Within a 60-game season?
Well, that's going through the games we played. Yeah, that would be in a 60-game season. Yeah, they said that. But that's also that would be through the June 25th date. So
that's what they were projecting to be if we were doing 162 games.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was going to say because we said he actually didn't do bad last year because I just looked it up. He had 24, 267, and 84 RBI. So I don't know why in the hell he's not picked up, honestly. Looking at that.
I think he's demanding too much money for kind of bouncing around so much.
Why did I think he had – I'm sorry to cut you off. Why did I think he had such a bad year?
I'm trying to think who you're thinking.
Because it was definitely portrayed that way. Like, it was definitely portrayed he was, like, a bad locker room person, and, like, he bounced from the Dodgers to Cincinnati in the offseason. I think he got off to a really slow start with Cincinnati because that's what it is. He batted .297 after he got traded to Cleveland, but his overall average for last season was .267.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So he only batted .252 with Cincinnati before the trade. So he had the power there, but in terms of average, he wasn't hitting for his normal average.
And no, I'm not sorry to cut you off, Bort. I'm not one of those people. Like, obviously, locker room presence is a big thing, but I think he gets kind of a bad rap just because he is such a dynamic player and plays with a lot of energy and emotion that people think he might be cocky or arrogant. I don't really see that with him, and I admire the fact that he plays with a lot of gusto. I think it's one of the things that makes him such a unique player to watch. I just think the problem is you have too many cooks in the kitchen in the outfield.
Good expression.
Thank you. And that's what it comes down to. Like, it's a nice to have, not a must have or need to have with him. Like I said, I think offensively they're fine. still think it just comes down to pitching. But Yasiel Puig, I apologize to you just because I thought you were dog shit last year and you clearly weren't. So whenever you get a chance to listen to this pod later on, feel free to give me a call. We could talk it over and give you a more formal apology. But yeah, I don't know why I thought his numbers. I thought he was batting like in the 190s. Like I thought he had an abysmal year. So I'm happy I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, even to be hitting 250 something, Andrew's right though. How the media talked about him was like he was hitting 202, like not 252.
So I was gonna say one guy I had before we get into our final topic is a guy. I guess he was hurt last year and he's kind of battled some injuries, but before he was pretty good, and that's Danny Salazar. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on him would be, but he's still a free agent, and with a 60-man invite, I would think about signing him maybe to potential invite just to see what he's able to do. Just because, I mean, he was an all-star in 2016 before he started battling injuries in 18 and 19.
He's really still a free agent. I didn't even know that. That's why I didn't say him. I figured he just had the skill to get picked up by now. But no, I agree with you 100% on that. He's a good guy to pick up.
I think it's guys like that don't want to sign the minor league deals, that don't want to just come in, at the major league minimum or whatever it is. I think those are the guys that are holding out for a better deal or are holding out, like
an injury.
Oh my God, what's Kimbrel? Like what Kimbrel did last year, that worked out for him. He ended up getting a deal that he wanted. So I think guys like that, I mean, if they think they're worth more, they'll bet on themselves and wait,
Yeah, although this year your waiting is probably going to have to be about 2 weeks compared to 2 months because we're only playing a 60-game season. So you're not
right, and if the rosters expand to 60 players on the 40-man, guys like that are going to end up finding jobs relatively quickly, I think.
I agree. Salazar's a really talented pitcher too. That's why I was surprised he's still on there. I didn't even see him on the list.
Yeah, according to the MLB Trade Rumors website, they have him on that list. So I think he's still out there at least for the time being. We'll be interested to see. It's funny. I guess Baseball Reference kind of just picks them a destination when they do the simulated stats.
Mm-hmm.
They have him with Colorado in 2020 for the simulated stats. So I guess that'd be a possible destination with them always struggling with pitching. But once again, Phillies, go get JT Realmuto on Friday once this freeze is over, and make sure that you guys extend him right away and don't wait, so fans can be happy with that. And now let's go into our last topic here. It's something Biscuit has seen on Twitter, and I think all of us have, about what everyone thinks about the 2020 World Series winner in this shortened season. Is it viewed? Which way is it viewed? And Biscuit, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, as you mentioned, Andrew, you guys have all seen it. Someone saying this season doesn't count unless this team wins it all. And like I said, I get it. You're always going to have people like that just because they're trying to delegitimize what another team has done. In a full-on regular season, I've tried doing that to teams just because I hate them and want the best for my team. It's nothing, I guess it's instinctual. It's natural. However, given the world that we live in today, we are getting a gift, ladies and gentlemen and listeners of the pod. Baseball coming back this year is a gift, given everything happening in our world and given everything happening in Major League Baseball. 2 weeks ago, this didn't seem likely. And I think for people to turn around and let's just say not even a team winning the World Series, but let's just say hypothetically, there is a situation where the Miami Marlins or the Pirates or just some team like the Kansas City Royals, some asinine team that you would not have thought in a 162 game season to be making it to the playoffs this year. Let's say somehow they make it in, which theoretically could happen, and they continue and they make it to the World Series or even win it. Like, is it fair to say, well, in 162 games, they wouldn't have made it because, it's not about how you start. It's about how you finish in baseball. However, like I mentioned earlier, this is a sprint, but fuck those people because, one, the playoff format is still the same. So let's say if, the Phillies, won the World Series this year, which, God, I would be fucking hype if they did. But they're still playing a full playoff bracket. Like, nothing is changing regarding the format, and the playoffs is a crapshoot anyway. Like, you mean to tell me, like, look at 2011. Did you think the Cardinals were going to win the World Series in 2011? Look last year with the Nationals. No one picked the Nationals to be the World Series winner last year. It was either always going to be Houston or the Dodgers. My point being is that baseball is still unpredictable, even in this format. And for you to legitimize something that a team has done is just not fair. I'm curious. I know most of us kind of agree on this, but does anyone have any different thoughts? Does anyone think things should be looked at differently? If the team that wins it all this year should have an asterisk next to their name? Because I just think that is so asinine, and it's unfair. It's unfair to what everyone has worked so hard for this year to get a, functioning product of a baseball season on the field this year. It just kind of taints that entire process. And even if, let's say, Team X like the Pirates, who, granted, I don't think are going to make it to the playoffs this year, and obviously probably not would do it in a 162-game season format. But, baseball is one of the most unpredictable sports. That's just how it is. And part of that's because of the longevity of the season. It's hard to kind of see how a team's going to project over a full 162 games. However, it is that random factor, and it is that unpredictable nature that makes baseball so unique, and what makes baseball the sport to say where that shit can fucking happen. That shit could fucking happen, man. You can't say, well, the Pirates wouldn't have made it to the playoffs if they weren't playing a full 162-game season. You don't know that. You can assume that because on paper that's, the kind of team that they were projected to be, but you do not know that because of baseball's unpredictability. And the fact that people are kind of going to use this shortened season to delegitimize team, not just the World Series, MVP winners, Cy Young Award winners, Rookie of the Year, everything is going to get a little bit more scrutinized just because of the fact that we are not playing a full 162-game season. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to those players. I don't think it's fair to the team. I don't think it's fair to the fans of those teams. So like I said, I'm opening it up to you guys, Boric, if you want to jump in, because I'm coming down, guys. I'm getting off my high horse a little bit here. But Boric, what do you think?
I was gonna say I completely agree with you. I think, like I said earlier, like Mad Dog said, and I agreed with him as soon as he said it. I don't even always agree with that guy. We're very back and forth when it comes to watching him. But you need to just take this season as is. However, I do think, like Biscuit said, there are going to be a decent amount of people, which he got at by using the expletives, that do look at it differently. Because when I looked at MLB Network last night and I took a picture of it, knowing we were probably going to talk about it with our podcast, the Rockies finished 37-23 after 60. So did the Giants. And they, of course, both finished with 77 and 71 wins. The Rangers finished 34-26 after 60, after finishing 78 and 84. Angels would have also been in at 34-26. And then the White Sox finished at 32-28 compared to teams that wouldn't have been in. The Nationals, of course, last year. Kansas City is another team, Biscuit. I don't think anybody expected them to win the World Series. But they were a team when they won the AL pennant the other year in 14. They were 29-31, last in the Central at the 60-game mark. And then in 18, when the Dodgers won the pennant, they were 30-30, third in the NL West at the 60-game mark. So like Chris Russo, Mad Dog, said, I think this is a year where I'm normally someone that loves seeing the underdogs and everybody get in. But I think this is a year you want to see the Dodgers, Yankees. You want to see all the powerhouse teams get in, because then people aren't going to question it. They won't question it as much because it seems like everything kind of fell into place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Boric. Teams that in 162 games that you could theoretically say, yes, I predicted this team to make it all the way. No one's going to question that, because it's the fucking Yankees. They have Garrett Cole. They have, one of the deepest, best lineups in baseball. Have that gusto to win it all. Same with the Dodgers with Mookie Betts, Bellinger, David Price. You wouldn't question those guys because the power, the team, the team's good. It's a good team. You're not going to sit there and question it. You're going to question the, Blue Jays, who granted have made strides over the last, couple of years and are, close to putting a winning product on the field, but you're going to question them because they're not really there. But if they compete, like, you still, like I said, it all goes back to the fact that baseball is unpredictable. Obviously, I don't believe any of us were born in the early 90s, so no one remembers the 93 team. But if there's one thing I do know about that fucking team, was that they went from being in last place the year prior, or the year before, to being the best team in baseball. And I'm sure everyone was doubting them at the time. And it's just, you can't delegitimize it just because of how unpredictable the nature of baseball is. And it's just so frustrating. Like I said, I see, and it's big, big name people, big baseball writers that we all follow who are saying stuff like that, Twitter accounts that we all see in Philly Twitter, the Philly Twitter sphere. And it's just so disheartening to see, because like I said, baseball is a gift. We're really special and lucky that we're going to be able to get to see some fraction of it this year. And the fact that we're already talking about how we're going to taint someone's, victory is just kind of sad to me. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right to anyone involved. And I'm not looking forward to having those conversations come October, when we're going to sit there and be like, but did player X really deserve the Cy Young? Because, he did great for this stretch, but you can't sit there and expect what they would do over a 162 game season. And we're just going to have that argument about everything. Every MVP winner, every Cy Young Award winner, the World Series winner, every team that makes the postseason that, whoever the fuck didn't think they had the slightest chance to do so. It's just opening up some stupid debate that I'm just not looking forward to having.
I'm going to have to disagree with both of you, by the way. I think what's going to end up happening here, and this is going to have to suck, if the Phillies were to win this World Series, if Bryce Harper were to win the MVP, if Aaron Nola were to win the Cy Young, if any of those three things happen, you're going to get people coming back to you on Twitter saying it was a 60-game season, it didn't count, whatever you want to say. The award counts. The World Series championship would count. But I'm going to agree with there having to be an asterisk there, because it's not a full 162-game season. I agree with that. I don't agree that they don't deserve it. If they deserve it over a 60 game, they had to earn it through 60 games of a season, but that's only 60 games. It's not a normal baseball season. And I want to compare this to, if this were to happen to the NFL, which it very well might. I don't know if they have plans set in stone yet, but imagine going into a season in the NFL and expecting 16 games, the normal amount of games, comparing that to the MLB, 162 games, cutting that down to 60. Imagine playing 60 games, or not 6 games in the NFL, 6 regular season games against just your division and 2 other opponents. What is that determined by? You can have 6 lucky games to start a season. Some teams start off hot and they blow it by the end of the season because teams learn how they play, how to adjust to playing them defensively, everything about an entire NFL season that they would learn over time. And if you're comparing that to, the MLB, if an NFL team wins all 6 games and makes it to the Super Bowl after the year before winning 4 games in a 16-game season, nobody's going to look at that and say that's legit. It's 6 games. That's it. That's all they want. If they win 6 games in a 16-game season, they're looked at as one of the worst teams in the league. So,
well, that's why I was saying this is a year those teams have to make it that we expect to make it. Then it wouldn't be questioned as much.
Right. And I think if in that case, you can't just say some of the teams that make it should actually count and some don't. That's not how it goes. Like what Biscuit said, the Nationals came out of nowhere last year, sneaked into the playoffs, and ended up winning the World Series. They weren't even projected. Really
Nobody expected KC to win. There's always teams.
Right. And so that kind of thing can happen. So, if the Pirates come out next year and end up winning the World Series, they deserve it, sure, but they're still going to get an asterisk. It doesn't matter. And I agree with that. If the Phillies do, they deserve an asterisk. I'm glad they win the World Series. I'm glad Bryce Harper would get an MVP. I don't think it counts to the same degree.
Yeah, I think it just depends how people look at it. Sorry for cutting you off.
You're fine. You're fine. Go for it, buddy.
I know from listening to all my cousins and family that watch baseball back in the 80s and 70s and stuff, divisional play and beating your division stuff, a lot of people just focus on the game as a whole nowadays because of social media, like the big home runs, the big plays, and everything. When my cousins and uncles and aunts said they watched the game, they always focus on how well they played the division, how well they played their counterpart AL rivals, which of course for the Phillies is Boston. They always play Boston. How they played those teams. And if for people like that, I think having a 60-game sprint might mean more to them rather than fans like from our generation that more just look at the the bigger eye-popping things, because baseball purists tend to love teams being as successful as they can be in their own division and then against the AL teams that we tend to play every year, like Boston, and then that's really who we only tend to play every year. But we play the Blue Jays every few years, so do good against those teams. So I think that could have a factor because you're going to have to run the gauntlet through your division, which the Phillies have had success some years and then haven't had success other years. And then last year, of course, we sucked against the Marlins. So that's why I think it might still – you probably will be right. It'll probably have an asterisk, but I think if you can look at it from that's not that easy, where sometimes you get easier opponents not playing your division the whole time.
I can get it for player. Like, I understand for, like, player accolades, like, you don't know how a player is going to perform over a full 162-game season. But with the World Series and the asterisk, I still think you're still playing a best-of-5 series, a best-of-7 series, and another best-of-7 series. Like, the playoff format's still the same. Like, going back to what Boric said, like, you're going to question the teams that, like, should they be there over a full 162-game season? But once they're there, and they're still playing a full postseason format that they would in any other year. And at that point, like I mentioned earlier, it's still just a crapshoot. Like, any team could win it at that point. Obviously, some teams, like, more talented teams have an advantage, or teams that are hot coming into it have the advantage. But at the same time, like, you were still playing a full postseason format like you would in any other year. So I still just don't see the reasoning behind having to put an asterisk next to the season, just because once you're in the playoffs, you still have to play up to the traditional standard like you would in any other year.
Yeah, I mean, don't we all think, too, it'll balance out more once we get to the postseason? Like, for example, if Pittsburgh somehow found their way to the postseason, if they have to play some of the teams in the NL in the postseason, I don't think their pitching and offense is stacking up against them.
Well, that was going to be one of my points was in this season, I almost feel like you can make an argument it's going to be more difficult for some teams. I mean, you start spring training you got to stop for multiple months, restart spring training. These pitchers are going to be pitching on not the way they want to. I mean, multiple ones have come out and said they're going to have to be shortened at multiple times. So you're going to have to overcome that type of obstacle. And then eventually, once you get to the postseason, like you said, Boric, it's going to play itself out. You're like, for example, take the Phillies, for example. If whoever wins the division and the Phillies get a wild card spot, you're going to get matched up with the number one seed, which would most likely be the Dodgers. So if you get to the World Series, you're still going to, obviously if you win the wild card game, you're going to have to face the Dodgers, and you're still going to have to beat the Dodgers in a series. Then you're still going to beat whomever the next series. And then obviously whatever happens in the AL, but say you get matched up with one of the better teams over there, and say the Yankees get in because they're expected to be good, and then you beat the Yankees in the World Series. I think you can justify it for being just as difficult this year as any other year.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't see a need to delegitimize it, and I think it's more. And obviously, Sean, I'm not saying this is in your case because I don't think this is the kind of person that you are. I think people are just petty and want to say it, but I don't know. Like I said, I just think there isn't a need to do it.
Yeah,
just go with the flow.
Right. If the Rays end up winning the World Series, I'm going to be hype and saying, yeah, they deserve that World Series. I love that team. But, if the Braves win, I'm going to say, they saved all their energy for the playoffs and they finally pushed through. They didn't choke this time. So,
okay.
Gosh.
Okay.
Please. Anyone but the Braves.
Okay, Mr. Hypocrite who just talked about how.
Yeah. No, but that's what I'm saying. I also said everything's going to have an asterisk. Even if the Rays, even if the Phillies win, there's going to be an asterisk. I'm not going to deny that. They finally didn't collapse for a season. So yeah, no, that's just how I feel about it. I think no matter what, there's going to be an asterisk, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing anybody can do. They want to play baseball for sure, and whoever wins, I'm sure that all of the players will agree that it is a sprint, and they're all going to be working equally as hard for a shortened amount of time. So whoever wins, the players are going to respect it and say they deserved it. But to us, the fans, there's going to be people out there that are, no matter who wins, they're going to be like, it doesn't count. It's a shortened season. It shouldn't count, whatever. But, I mean, that's just how it is. That's how sports media works.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, you got it. I was just going to say that you just have to let things go and let it be. In a year like this, the virus, you could never foresee anything like this. So people might look at it differently just because 2020 was 2020. So people might look back at it and say there might not be as much of an asterisk because never in my wildest dreams would I have predicted having to live through a year like that.
No, yeah, absolutely. And whether you see it as a tainted World Series or not, either way, we finally have baseball, which will be coming back July 23rd. And I don't know if you guys have any other final thoughts before I close this out.
Final thought for me, God bless baseball. God bless the Phillies. And come July 24th, let's fucking get it, boys.
My final thought is we just signed a future All-Star today in Casey Martin, a third-round pick. So, he's going to be good in a few years down the line. So my final thought is just hyping him up and basically becoming like Jack Fritz was with Aaron O'Tear and others with Casey Martin. So, yeah, Casey Martin's going to be the dude. Yeah.
My final thought is I can't wait for Bryce Harper to be the only player in the league with 30-plus home runs this season. That's
right on.
That's a great take, and hopefully that happens. Again, baseball will be back July 23rd, 24th. Once they finalize the schedule, hopefully we'll get it sooner rather than later. But don't forget, with baseball coming back, don't forget to go get a sandwich for the opening day game. Go to Just Food. Their phone number is 215-794-FOOD or 215-794-3663. Visit our guy, Asian Rob, and ask for the chef's choice, or get any type of deli sandwich you want, anywhere from a pulled pork sandwich, Italian sandwich, roast beef, etc. Check out their menu on their website, or again, call them at 215-794-3663. And I will send it off to the Jackdolls to take us out here. You can find them and any of their music at www.jackdolls.com. Thank you for listening to another episode of Chase Independent. And for Bork, Biscuit, Sean, and Andrew, thank you for joining us.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eager my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.